Paranoia big boss in order to marry the beloved young master, even willing to share his wife with other men. Who would have thought that on the day of their wedding, young Master Bei would suddenly come to make trouble, and Zhang Luoyuo would completely die in her husband's arms in order to save Fu Tingchuan from a gun. 7 days later, Fu Tingchuan looked sadly at the young master on the tombstone, and he did not let go of anyone who should be punished. But when he thought of the young master alone, he was afraid of Fu Tingchuan, so he decided to accompany him. Fu Tingchuan went to the top floor of the building with a bomb. He wanted to bury all the people here with Luo Luo, but looking at the half-round sunset glow, his mind suddenly flashed with the face of the young master. Zhang Luoyuo pointed to the sunset with a smile and said, "This world is beautiful." Fu Tingchuan couldn't help but cover his face with his hands and cry. He stood on the steps and jumped out. "Finally, I can see my little master again." At this time, Zhang Luoyuo in the space-time transfer station looks at the picture of President Ba dying for himself. He begged the system to let him go back to save Fu Tingchuan, but the system told the host not to be sad because the target of the next world raid was still Fu Tingchuan, but the memories of their previous plane would be sealed. After Zhang Luoyuo heard this, the mental system immediately told him that the target of the raid was the top-level elf with incredible power. When Zhang Luoyuo heard this, she knew that the next plane was the Abo world, so he can't be the most expensive Omega system, but he says he only guessed half the host, and in the next world, the Mega with the Gland defect can't be permanently marked by an Alpha, and it's hard to conceive. Defective Omegas like this are seen as false symbols, so they're usually given as gifts to big shots to make connections. Zhang Luoyuo didn't expect her living environment in the new world to be so harsh, but before he could ask any other questions, the system kicked him directly into the next plane. When Zhang Luoyuo opened her eyes, she found that the people around her were pointing at her. However, before he could react to what was going on, he saw a man sitting in front of him with a strong aura. Is this the object he wants to attack? The boy was given a gift by his father to the big guys because of his physical defects. Zhang Luoyuo had just arrived at the new plane when she realized that all the men were staring at her unkindly. The system told him that he had to win the target of his attack today, otherwise, he would be given to Old Man Li by the Zhang family, and the difficulty of the subsequent raid would also increase exponentially. Zhang Luoyuo thought that as a 1 in a million Omega, it should be easy to lure him to Alf with pheromones, and so he immediately sent out pheromones and begged men pitifully to take him, and he would do anything to do that, including marking himself on a bird, or else he would be given to the old man by his family. It is well known that Omega Huo Fu has always been close to O color. I just when the people around me are ready to see the little young master joke, but I don't want Huo Zedong to ask the name of the little young master. Even when I smelled Zhang Luoyuo's milk like pheromone, my heart still had a slight movement. He'd always refused any Omega for his career, but fortunately most of the Omega he'd met were mediocre and didn't bother him. But I don't know why this time, seeing the boy's pitiful appearance, I couldn't help but feel my heart racing, and even I couldn't help but think of the image of him being abused. Huo Zedong explained for a moment that the Zhang family sent him here to get the mining rights of a mine. Zhang Luoyuo's face immediately turned pale after listening. How could he compare to a mine? Just as he lost, Huo Zedong suddenly held him in his arms. From today on, you are my person. Who knows that everyone present cannot help but be stunned. Zhang Luoyuo didn't react until the hotel saw Huo Zedong put him under the bed and planned to leave. Zhang Luoyuo quickly asked him why he didn't mark himself. Huo Zedong saw that he was young and might not know what self-marking meant, so he explained that after the doctor checked his body, they would decide when to start marking Zhang Luoyuo. After listening to it, she suddenly felt a little lost and then turned to ask pitifully if she could hug him. Huo Zedong reached out and held the boy in his arms. He didn't know why he couldn't resist the temptation of other Europeans and Americans. After the physical examination, Zhang Luoyuo was very worried that Huo Zedong would mind if he knew about his gland defects. Just as he was worried, he came to the study to look for a man. Huo Zedong's angry voice came from inside. Zhang Luoyuo heard it and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. Is the defective thing in their mouth talking about him? The boy thought that his husband disliked his physical defects, so he ran out alone without waiting to ask. But when he ran out, he was stopped by his family. He thought his young master didn't like being chased out, so regardless of Zhang Luoyuo's explanation, he forced her into the car and brought her back. When he arrived at Jiang's house, they were in a family meeting. When Father Zhang saw his son coming back, he thought that the deal had failed and pissed off. He was useless. Zhang Luoyuo looked at the ugly face of that family and felt very disgusted. In addition, the Gland did not send him. He just wanted to leave here quickly. Who knew that as soon as he turned around and left, he was stopped by his half-brother. Zhang Luoyuo didn't understand why he had to stay since they all hated him so much. The stepmother looked disgusted and said that she naturally could not let him leave easily because they had already planned that since Mr. Huo refused to accept him, They could only give Zhang Luoyuo to the older Uncle Li as his wife. He advised Zhang Luoyuo to marry him. It was best to be obedient. Uncle Baijing had already killed several wives. Zhang Luoyuo looked at the family discussing how to sell herself for a good price. She felt very disgusted. However, as the glands kept getting hotter and hotter, Zhang Luoyuo could not stand anymore. Zhang Tianzhen saw that Zhang Luoyuo had already reached the estrus period. Zhang Tianzhen didn't expect this little slut to dare to beat himself when he just wanted to play and put people into his arms, who knew that just as he raised his hand, he was kicked out by someone. Mr. Huo looked at Zhang Tianzhen, who was scolding him, gloomily and wanted to kill him. Father Zhang looked at Mr. Huo with a shocked face and just wanted to speak, but Huo Zedong held his neck with a knife. You Zhang family are really bold. While doing business with me, you still want to transfer my people to others. Zhang Fu's fear quickly denied that Huo Zedong would put the knife in his hand the next moment. Your son touched my people. Do you want to apologize? When Father Zhang saw this, he quickly knelt down and begged for mercy from Mr. Huo. Then he ordered Zhang Luoyuo to help him persuade Mr. Huo together, but Huo Zedong's eyes became more and more impatient. Father Zhang had no choice but to stab his son's palm with a knife and scream. Huo Zedong sneered and hugged Zhang Luoyuo and turned to leave. However, as the pheromone leaked, it became more and more powerful. Zhang Luoyuo's face flushed, she felt uncomfortable, and she subconsciously grabbed Huo Zedong. Mr. Huo, can you mark me now? The boy had to throw himself at the man because he was in estrus. Huo Zedong looked at Zhang Luoyuo, whose face was flushed, and pleaded in a low voice. The last string in his heart finally couldn't hold it anymore. He uses his last shred of sanity to take people to the nearest hotel, and once inside, he can't control his pheromones anymore. Huo Zedong asked in a low voice if the people below him were ready until Zhang Luoyuo nodded gently and he began to make deep marks. After one night, the system tells the host that Huo Zedong's favorable impression has risen to 20, but Zhang Luoyuo did not expect to show up and only grow so little. Indeed, there is a defect in the gland, that is, it cannot retain the pheromone of the other party. At this time, look at the empty room. Zhang Luoyuo thought that Huo Zedong helped himself last night should also be affected by pheromones. Under disappointment, he just wanted to open the door and leave. Huo Zedong came back. He said that he had just received a phone call and was afraid to wake you up, so he went out. It was the first time someone cared so much about him. Zhang Luoyuo was moved and threw herself into a man's arms. Mr. Huo treats him very well, unlike his family. Besides beating him and scolding him, he will only despise him for being disabled. Huo Zedong remembered that Dr. Liu just told him that Omega in estrus period will especially rely on marking his own ALF. However, young Master Jiang's glands are defective, so it is difficult to be marked as a stable partner. Huo Zedong felt that he believed in his feelings more than he did physically. Zhang Luoyuo felt very guilty when she thought that she had delayed her husband's time because she ran around. Huo Zedong asked him not to apologize. Since he chose to stay, he would not leave it alone. Zhang Luoyuo was very touched after listening to what she could do to repay Mr. Huo Zedong. Immediately attached himself to press people under him. There are many ways to repay, such as last night. Zhang Luoyuo immediately blushed. As his clothes untied one by one, he couldn't help but call out hubby. The boy kindly helped her husband and his girlfriend resolve their hatred. Who thought that the other party would secretly rub together and intend to rob her husband? Zhang Luoyuo, who didn't know about it, welcomed Huo Zedong to stay in her house and watched Huo Zedong treat Zhang Luoyuo gently and thoughtfully. Lin Ji couldn't help but feel jealous. Who was Zhang Luoyuo who could make Huo Zedong fall in love with him? After Huo Zedong left, Zhang Luoyuo took Lin Ji to the study. Looking at the Omega books on the bookshelf, Lin Ji knew that it was impossible for Huo Zedong to read them. Then he looked at Zhang Luoyuo's guilty face. Lin Ji suddenly felt that this kind of vase that did not even know the estrus period was not enough to be afraid of. Just as Zhang Luoyuo did not know how to explain. Fortunately, Huo Zedong finally appeared. Lin Ji looked at the two of them. After thinking about it, I decided to build a good relationship with Zhang Luoyuo first, gain Huo Zedong's trust, and then drive him away when the time was right. Lin Ji deliberately smiled and said that Luo was almost eaten into a small hamster. I thought Huo Zedong's family education was very disgusted with Mei Luo's distant behavior. Huo Zedong didn't care about it and even said he wanted to take Zhang Luoyuo to his friend's newly opened winery. The simple Zhang Luoyuo, in order to help her husband and Lin Ji's relationship, took the initiative to bring Lin Ji together. Huo Zedong originally did not want to bring this light bulb, but he had to nod and agree on Zhang Luoyuo's face. When the three people came to the winery together on Saturday, Zhang Luoyuo looked at this huge venue and couldn't help but feel that it was Huo Zedong's friend who burned money. When he arrived at the archery venue, Zhang Luoyuo expressed great interest, but Huo Zedong said that he would come and teach him archery after he had discussed things. After Huo Zedong left, Zhang Luoyuo immediately picked up the bow and arrow. Suddenly, someone called his name. Zhang Luoyuo turned around and saw that it was Zhang Tianyi. I haven't seen Jiang's little son for a few days. Why does he smell like omega pheromones? The boy finally found a good old palace who loved him and loved him. Whoever wanted to compete with the people around him for one or two, even his own brother is no exception. On this day, Zhang Luoyuo followed the old palace to play in a friend's manner. But I don't want to meet the original brother Zhang Tianyi here, but I only feel very disgusting when I face Zhang Luoyuo deliberately. Immediately after smelling the omega pheromone on Zhang Tianyi, Zhang Luoyuo couldn't help but ridicule that once the family's favorite AFA competition also differentiated into its own most hated omega. Who see is Zhang Laozi when going to send you to this time? Zhang Tianyi was humiliated when he was angry, and he suddenly poured red wine on Zhang Luoyuo. However, Huo Zedong, who was chatting with his friends, could not help but hear the movement and watch the younger son of the Zhang family bully Luo Luo. Huo Zedong walked over with a gloomy face and stood in front of his wife, staring at each other. Do you know that Luo Luo's clothes will be stained according to the price? Zhang Tianyi was frightened by Huo Zedong's momentum and retreated repeatedly. He explained that he did not intend to flee the scene, but how could Huo Zedong easily let him leave? He pulled up his bow and aimed it at Zhang Tianyi not far away. As soon as he let go, he saw the bow and arrow close to each other's face. After Huo Zedong finished breathing, he gently took Luo Luo to change clothes. Lin Jian knew Huo Zedong was really interested in Zhang Luoyuo. It seemed that he had to act. At night, Zhang Luoyuo finally met Lin Ji again at the banquet. He was embarrassed to tell the other party that he accidentally overslept in the afternoon. Lin Ji, however, saw the clues on his lips and joked, "I'm afraid you're not the only one who overslept." Zhang Luoyuo's face was just about to turn around, but Lin Ji pulled him to the other side and said that he had a few friends who wanted to introduce him to the people on the sofa who had just passed. When Lin Ji introduced him as Mr. Huo's boyfriend, his eyes suddenly became even hotter. As we all know, every little beast has an anti-G husband's wish, and even the soft little master is no exception. On this day, the system told the host that the main brain had specially prepared a special banquet for him to reward him for successfully completing the mission. Zhang Luoyuo was excited at the thought of being able to counter Ji Fu Tingchuan and immediately brought him to the destination. Fu Tingchuan looked at the people in the party and thought that Luo Luo might have something to surprise him, so he quietly changed his clothes. The system told Zhang Luoyuo that in order to make him have fun, the main brain specially upgraded all the props and clothes provided at the banquet will have special effects. As long as you wear them, you can experience your own role immersively. Zhang Luoyuo immediately put on the 30th prince's suit and the system reminded him that he now has the ability exclusive to the Blood Clan. If he converts his companions into XX when the blood moon rises, he can get the reward of dominating the other party for an entire night. Zhang Luoyuo excitedly prepared to find Fu Tingchuan, but did not expect that the other party had already been waiting for him at the door. As the ball began, Fu Tingchuan and Zhang Luoyuo slowly slid into the dance floor. Zhang Luoyuo danced while sizing up Fu Tingchuan's dress. His role should not be some medieval aristocrat. Fu Tingchuan said that he guessed correctly that he is now an earl with a prominent family background. Zhang Luoyuo saw this and tested whether the other party could guess his identity. Fu Tingchuan answered the question and said that he would always be his lovely and charming prince. Zhang Luoyuo carefully observed and couldn't see the identity of the other party. There was nothing special about it. Therefore, she decided that Fu Tingchuan was just an ordinary human being. Thinking about it, she handed Fu Tingchuan the added red wine. As the blood moon rose outside, Zhang Luoyuo knew that it was time for him to kill. At this time, Fu Tingchuan, who had finished drinking, suddenly felt that his body was very hot and his heartbeat was very fast. It was as if his body was not his own. Zhang Luoyuo was happy to see this. She supported Fu Tingchuan. "My Earl, come to my room." As soon as the two of them left the banquet, Zhang Luoyuo couldn't wait to taste Fu Tingchuan's blood. Fu Tingchuan took the opportunity to avoid each other's approach, indicating that there were people coming and going here. After listening to the impatient Zhang Luoyuo, she had to follow the man in, but she did not notice that the man's mouth rose with a smile. The boy Anta turned over in front of the old palace and took the old palace to the dress party without knowing it. Looking at Fu Tingchuan, who had transformed into a human noble, Zhang Luoyuo, the Blood Clan prince, couldn't wait to pull him into the room. "Who knew that when I first entered the door, I smelled a medicinal fragrance?" Zhang Luoyuo realized that the situation was wrong. Fu Tingchuan explained that this was their family's treasure, which was specially used to deal with vampires. Zhang Luoyuo, who was weak all over, reacted. Fu Tingchuan lied to him, and he only blamed himself for guessing half of it. His identity is indeed human, but he is also a 20G hunter among humans. As his limbs were slowly locked in chains, Zhang Luoyuo couldn't help but curse the dogman for being sinister and cunning. Fu Tingchuan said that he was only obeying the rules of the banquet. Now it's time for them to play some exciting games. Zhang Luoyuo immediately became bold when she heard this. Before he could say anything, Fu Tingchuan took out his pistol and pointed it at his chest. 2 shots were fired. Zhang Luoyuo suddenly felt that her chest became very hot. Fu Tingchuan didn't expect the reaction to come so quickly. He listened to Zhang Luoyuo's soft body pleading. He finally couldn't help but lean over and tee up. Just as the two of them were having fun, they suddenly heard a wolf. Fu Tingchuan's body suddenly trembled because of this. Zhang Luoyuo saw his situation and knew that this was a change of personality. Zhang Luoyuo decided to ask him to untie her chain first before she knew what had happened. She pretended to be pitiful and said that the main personality was bullying him again. Zhang Luoyuo wanted to take the opportunity to slip away, but she suddenly couldn't move her whole body after taking a few steps. Zhang Luoyuo stared at his ear and realized that the second personality also had a ball roll and that the blood race was a natural enemy. Zhang Luoyuo was so angry that she scolded the System 6, then knelt down with her secondary personality. Zhang Luoyuo then uncontrollably kneeled on her knees and guessed that this might be the werewolf's L ability. Before he could shout, the bad sub-personality had already taken advantage of her and held her in his arms. From now on, you're gonna do whatever you want. How do you see this video? Remember to like, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below.